Hyun-soo was an ordinary college student with asthma. One day, his friends invite him to a party at a farmhouse. Hyun-soo declines, saying he has a group assignment to work on. However, that night, the assignment gets cancelled, so Hyun-soo decides to join his friends at the farmhouse. After his parents advise him not to stay out late, he steals his father's taxi keys and leaves the house without getting caught. To ensure his father doesn't find out about the car, he turns off the dash cam and drives away. When he stops at a signal, a girl named Gukwa enters the taxi for a ride. Hyun-soo keeps telling Gukwa that the taxi is off duty, but she doesn't understand his situation. With no other option, Hyun-soo decides to drop her off at her destination. As he stops at a gas station, Gukwa asks him to buy some cigarettes and beer from the store. While Gukwa is waiting outside, a stranger tries to approach her but retreats when he sees Hyun-soo. On their way to Gukwa's destination, the Han River, Hyun-soo receives a video call from his friends who are waiting for him at the farmhouse. This is when Gukwa realizes why Hyun-soo didn't want to give her a ride. Soon, Hyun-soo drops her off at the Han River, and they begin to get along. They grab 2 ice creams from a cart and run away without paying. While sitting by the riverside, Gukwa shares a drug with Hyun-soo, which he hesitantly takes. While dropping her off at her house, Hyun-soo accidentally scratches a parked car. The owner, who is sitting inside, gets out and forgives Hyun-soo because the scratch isn't very visible. Gukwa takes Hyun-soo inside the house while the car owner watches them suspiciously. As they sit in the kitchen drinking alcohol, Hyun-soo asks the girl about her house. Gukwa shares that her mother died 3 years ago from cancer, and since then, she has been sharing the house with her friend. However, she recently kicked her friend out due to a big falling out last week. After they have some shots, Gukwa gives Hyun-soo a new drug, which he takes without considering the consequences. Acting strangely, Gukwa suddenly stabs at Hyun-soo's hand, but luckily, the knife misses and instead plunges into the table. Gukwa then urges Hyun-soo to try his luck with her hand too. Going along with it, Hyun-soo makes a move, but this time, the knife strikes true and pierces through her hand. Panicked, Hyun-soo tries to stop the bleeding with tissue, but it seems like Gukwa isn't concerned about her wound right now. She gets closer to Hyun-soo, and the two start kissing passionately. She then leads him upstairs to her room, where they spend some intimate time together. After some time, Hyun-soo wakes up on the living room couch. Since it's late at night, he quickly puts on his clothes and heads upstairs to bid Gukwa goodbye. However, when he tries to pat her on the back, he feels something wet. Switching on the lights, he discovers Gukwa murdered, stabbed in the back multiple times. Panicked, he recoils in shock. All he can think about is fleeing the crime scene as soon as possible. He tries to drive away in his taxi but realizes he's left the key inside the house. Desperate, he tries to get back in, but the door is locked. He breaks a side window and manages to unlock the door from the inside. Unbeknownst to him, an old man witnesses his actions from his own house. As Hyun-soo puts on his jacket, which has the key, he notices the kitchen island where he stabbed Gukwa in the hand. Realizing his fingerprints are all over, Hyun-soo hurriedly wipes the table with a tissue, inadvertently spreading blood around. With no other choice, he grabs the knife with his prints and flees the house. On his way home, he runs into a traffic checkpoint, catching the attention of the on-duty cops. Officer Han Bile immediately notices Hyun-soo's possible intoxication and decides to conduct a breath test. However, just as she prepares, her breathalyzer's battery dies, preventing her from confirming his condition. At that moment, they receive a report of a break-in nearby. Reluctant to release Hyun-soo without testing him, Officer Han Bile decides to take him to the scene. As they arrive, Hyun-soo realizes with dread that it's Gukwa's house they are heading to. It turns out the same old man called the cops after witnessing Hyun-soo breaking into Gukwa's house. His eyesight was weak, so he couldn't see the culprit's face, but he sensed something was amiss, so he called the cops. Soon, the police search the house and discover Gukwa murdered on her bed. More officers arrive at the scene, including Chief Park, head of the detective department. Spotting Hyun-soo, he inquires about him, and Officer Han Bile introduces him as her arrest. 2 other officers are tasked with taking Hyun-soo to the police station. During the ride, they discuss how the woman has been stabbed 13 times in the back. Shocked, Hyun-soo asks if she is dead, to which the officers confirm her demise. Meanwhile, the forensic expert informs Chief Park that the murder appears deliberate due to its brutality. Outside Gukwa's home, Chief Park notices Sun Hun, the car owner who had encountered Hyun-soo earlier. Sun Hun is speaking to an officer, mentioning that the boy who killed the girl seemed strange. Intrigued, Chief Park questions Sun Hun about what he saw. Initially reluctant to get involved, Sun Hun brushes it off as nothing. However, when Chief Park presses him with details matching his earlier statement, Sun Hun realizes he has no choice but to cooperate with the police interrogation. Meanwhile, Hyun-soo is brought to the police station. Panicked, he tries to flee but stops when he sees the elderly man walking in. The man notices Hyun-soo but doesn't recognize him. Meanwhile, Chief Park returns from the crime scene. When he sees Hyun-soo still there, he instructs Officer Han Bile to conduct a sobriety test on him. Noticing something odd about Hyun-soo's eyes, Chief Park orders the officers to also check if he has drugs on him. While discussing the case with his colleagues, Chief Park recounts the details. A man in his 20s ran out of the house and escaped in a taxi. Upon hearing this, the elderly man clarifies that the culprit didn't need to hail a taxi but actually drove away in his own taxi. This statement raises suspicions against Hyun-soo, who was apprehended while driving a taxi. During the search for drugs, Officer Han Bile discovers a knife in Hyun-soo's jacket, confirming his involvement in the murder. Panicked, Hyun-soo breaks down in tears, insisting repeatedly that he is innocent. Despite his protests, he is arrested with reassurances that he will have an opportunity to explain himself. In the interrogation room, Hyun-soo recounts his visit to Guk-hwa's house to Chief Park. Chief Park points out that Hyun-soo was the last person to see Guk-hwa alive and the first to find her dead, making him a suspect in her murder. To delve deeper into the investigation, Hyun-soo was instructed to remove his clothes to check for defensive wounds. Unfortunately for Hyun-soo, the police find scratch marks on his back and blood stains all over his body, revealed by luminol and blue light. Although these scratches and blood stains were caused by Guk-hwa while she was with Hyun-soo in the room, the police interpret them as the victim's last effort to defend herself. Hyun-soo tries to convince the police that he's innocent, but his efforts fail, leading to his placement in a detention cell. There, he observes another detainee speaking with his lawyer. Feeling he may need legal representation too, Hyun-soo asks the police about the procedure, only to be ridiculed. They mockingly question why he would need a lawyer if he's not guilty. Meanwhile, lawyer Jung-han hears about Hyun-soo's case. Initially reluctant, he eventually cannot ignore Hyun-soo's predicament. Jung-han approaches Hyun-soo in the detention cell and listens to his account of events. After hearing Hyun-soo's story, Jung-han advises him not to speak to anyone else without his lawyer present. With that interaction between the duo, Hyun-soo gets a lawyer. After conversing with Hyun-soo, Jung-han speaks with a police officer to gather details about the case. There, he learns that Chief Park is leading the case. Returning to the detention cell, Jung-han advises Hyun-soo with two key points. Firstly, he emphasizes that truth and justice are irrelevant within the confines of the police station. The facts in Hyun-soo's claims hold little weight. What truly matters is securing an advantage. Secondly, Jung-han urges Hyun-soo to maintain complete silence about the events of that night. He explains that while they speak, the police are constructing their own narrative. By keeping quiet, Hyun-soo prevents the officers from gathering further incriminating evidence against him. Additionally, this silence allows them to discern the police's actual strategy in the case. While they discuss, Chief Park is seen interrogating Sun Hun and taking Officer Han Bile's statement. Jung-han emphasizes that Chief Park is not an ordinary cop. He meticulously gathers information firsthand, whether it's evidence or witness accounts. No matter how minor the detail, he operates like a silent predator, patiently waiting for the opportune moment. Once he identifies a vulnerability, he strikes decisively. True to Jung-han's warnings, Chief Park discovers Hyun-soo's nebulizer at the crime scene but opts not to submit it to the evidence room. Later, Chief Park contacts Guk-hwa's stepfather, Mr. Gang Pil, to inform him of her death. He summons Gang Pil to the police station to obtain his consent for Guk-hwa's autopsy. It's revealed that Guk-hwa and Gang Pil had never been close. Their relationship was merely on paper due to Gang Pil's brief marriage to Guk-hwa's mother. After his wife passed away from cancer 3 years ago, Gang Pil moved out and hasn't seen Guk-hwa since. Later, Gang Pil signs the autopsy consent form, allowing the police to proceed with their investigation. Later, Hyun-soo's parents are summoned to the police station and given a room to speak privately with their son. Unbeknownst to them, Chief Park eavesdrops on their conversation through a CCTV camera. Upon learning about Hyun-soo's parents' presence, Jung-han rushes to the station to prevent any inadvertent statements that Chief Park could exploit against Hyun-soo. As soon as he enters the room, Chief Park realizes that his plan has been ruined. Thankfully, Hyun-soo didn't say anything that could put him in trouble. Later, in the detention cell, Jung-han informs Hyun-soo about Chief Park's surveillance of their meeting. He stresses the seriousness of the situation, but Hyun-soo remains calm, stating that he only told his parents of his innocence. Seeing Hyun-soo's lack of precaution, Jung-han advises him to consider the situation from a judge's perspective and to be more careful with his words. According to Jung-han, the judge is likely to view Hyun-soo as the culprit due to the presence of his fingerprints all over the crime scene, bloodstains on his body, and the bloody knife in his possession. He believes that despite Hyun-soo's insistence on proclaiming his innocence, the truth he speaks won't sway the judge's suspicions. Meanwhile, Chief Park updates the commissioner on the case, presenting all the evidence pointing to Hyun-soo as the perpetrator. The commissioner questions why Chief Park hasn't yet referred the case to the prosecutor, given the solid evidence. Perplexed, Chief Park seeks guidance on the next steps. The commissioner advises him to secure a confession from Hyun-soo. He persuades Chief Park that solving this case will enhance his career, potentially leading to a detective position at a legal firm belonging to a friend after his retirement. After the meeting with the commissioner, Chief Park visits Hyun-soo and returns his nebulizer, attempting to appear caring and sympathetic in order to coax more information about the night of the crime from him. However, Hyun-soo remains silent as advised by Jung-han. Chief Park tries to provoke Hyun-soo against Jung-han, suggesting that lawyers should know the full details before advocating for their clients. Hyun-soo respectfully rebuffs Chief Park, insisting that he should not speak to him without his lawyer present. Following this interaction, Chief Park decides to proceed with handing Hyun-soo over to the prosecution. Convinced by the weight of the evidence against Hyun-soo, Chief Park is confident that he is the perpetrator. The next day, Hyun-soo was given clothes to change into, including a fake Gucci t-shirt. Jung-han immediately suspects Chief Park's motives, believing he is trying to tarnish Hyun-soo's image and make him appear less credible or trustworthy. He argues with the officers, but they dismiss his concerns and escort Hyun-soo to court. Prosecutor Tae-hee requests the judge to remand Hyun-soo in custody, citing 117 pieces of evidence that allegedly prove his guilt in the murder. When questioned about his involvement, Hyun-soo maintains his innocence. Jung-han then petitions the judge to release Hyun-soo, highlighting that he is a typical college student with no criminal record. He argues that the prosecution's case relies on circumstantial evidence and witness statements, lacking direct eyewitnesses to the crime. Therefore, Jung-han contends that Hyun-soo should be granted release to adequately prepare for his trial. Prosecutor Tae-hee addresses the judge, emphasizing the seriousness and brutality of the crime. With strong evidence against Hyun-soo, the judge decides to send him to jail pending further proceedings, stating that he will remain there until his innocence is proven. Hyun-soo finds himself in a cell with Sang-soo and a wimp inmate who is a target of brutal torture and bullying by the prison gang. The wimp exhibits symptoms of panic disorder, aggravated by the relentless abuse from fellow prisoners. At night, when the prison lights are turned off, Hyun-soo struggles to adjust to his new environment, experiencing anxiety and shortness of breath. He relies on his nebulizer to calm himself down and stabilize his breathing. As morning breaks, the wimp once again suffers a severe beating at the hands of the prison gang. The gang's leader is Biko, with Do-sik serving as his right-hand man, known for his penchant for tormenting vulnerable inmates like Hyun-soo's cellmate. Among the notorious inmates is Do Ji-tae, nicknamed the Lion of the Northern Prison. Ji-tae controls the drug trade within the facility, using various methods and networks to manage supply and distribution. His trusted associate, Bonesetter, is infamous for his expertise in inflicting bone-breaking injuries. Ji-tae's influence extends throughout the prison, controlling everything from drug transactions to basic commodities like cigarettes. When Hyun-soo visits the infirmary to get his nebulizer, he brings painkillers for his cellmate. However, Do-sik suddenly appears and confronts Hyun-soo, threatening him for helping their victim. He asserts that the wimp belongs to their group. Do-sik moves to attack Hyun-soo, but Ji-tae intervenes by blowing a whistle, signaling Do-sik and his cronies to back off and leave the cell without harming Hyun-soo. Thanks to Ji-tae's intervention, Hyun-soo's life is saved. Meanwhile, Jung-han approaches prosecutor Tae-hee and demands access to Hyun-soo's case files. Tae-hee initially denies his request, but Jung-han has already filed a demurrer, a formal application to access the files. He then approaches another prosecutor involved in the case and discovers their strategy to coerce a confession from Hyun-soo. Despite Hyun-soo's protests of innocence, they plan to charge him with drug offenses, rape, and special assault to secure a conviction. Later, Chief Park calls Jung-han and asks if he is certain of Hyun-soo's innocence. While Jung-han believes in Hyun-soo's innocence, Chief Park is convinced that Hyun-soo was a murderer. With 30 years of experience in the field, Chief Park has learned that the most difficult criminals to catch are the ones with eyes like Hyun-soo's. Believing that Hyun-soo is only pretending to be innocent, Chief Park tries to make Jung-han understand that the client he is defending might not be as innocent as he thinks. Still determined to defend Hyun-soo, Jung-han approaches his parents and informs them about the case. Though he doesn't want to burden them, he also needs to make ends meet, so he gives them a discounted 50,000 won fee voucher for defending Hyun-soo in court. He advises them not to rely on a public defender because they briefly meet the client and just accept the penalty given by the judge. During the conversation, Jung-han receives a message that prosecutor Tae-hee is holding a press conference today. In her press conference, Tae-hee portrays Hyun-soo as a rapist and murderer, informing the public how he committed the crime. To make matters worse, she discloses his identity, allowing everyone in the prison to learn what Hyun-soo was accused of. Although they are all criminals, they despise rapists and murderers the most. If someone is a newcomer, things get really tough for them. Panicked by all the negative attention from the inmates, Hyun-soo calls Jung-han. Before Hyun-soo can say anything, Jung-han warns him that the call is being recorded, so he must be careful. When Hyun-soo asks about the case proceedings, Jung-han responds that the court will hold a hearing to review the legality of the confinement in 10 days. He comforts Hyun-soo and urges him to cope with the pressure and anxiety until then. After Tae-hee's press conference, Jung-han stops some of the press and introduces himself as the accused attorney. He presents his side of the story to the public, saying that the prosecution is only accusing Hyun-soo based on circumstantial evidence and that the police made a hasty judgment in portraying him as the killer. The interview is heard by Mi Kyung, a lawyer and the head of a well-known law firm. Hyun-soo's case piques her interest, so she decides to defend him in court. She sends a rookie lawyer, Soo-jin, to Hyun-soo's home to talk to his parents about taking over the case. The parents are invited to her office, where Mi Kyung discusses how Jung-han is a third-rate attorney known for his work with petty offenders. Portraying him as a mere fraud, she promises Hyun-soo's parents that she will bring their son home and do it for free. Hyun-soo's parents are pleased to hear that a well-known lawyer will be defending their son, so they agree to change their son's attorney. On the other hand, Hyun-soo faces serious backlash from fellow inmates ever since details about his case were broadcasted. The prison gang abducts him, covering his head with a black cloth and taking him to a dark room. There, they attempt to strangle him for his alleged heinous crimes. As he nears death, a prison guard signals the gang leader to release him. Meanwhile, Jung-han pretends to be on a call with Chief Park to gain entry to the crime scene, Guk-hwa's house. Using his connection with the chief, he successfully enters the premises. While searching, he discovers a painting labeled Hyojong in a package with the same name, sparking his interest. After thoroughly searching the house, he buys some clothes for Hyun-soo and pays him a visit. In addition to clothes, Jung-han gives Hyun-soo his inmate accounts where he has deposited a small amount. Hyun-soo feels awkward because he has to inform Jung-han that he now has a new lawyer. He begins by expressing gratitude to Jung-han for his efforts during his difficult times and then reveals that attorney Mi Kyung will now be representing him in court. Though Jung-han is somewhat surprised, he acknowledges that Mi Kyung is a well-known lawyer who can handle Hyun-soo's case effectively. When Hyun-soo tries to return the clothes Jung-han bought, Jung-han insists on keeping them and wishes him the best of luck before leaving the prison. Back in prison, the bonesetter arrives at Hyun-soo's cell to take him to Ji-tae. Ji-tae has gathered some inmates to interrogate them about who might have traded cigarettes behind his back. He suspects Hyun-soo knows the culprit, but Hyun-soo is too frightened to reveal the person's name. Observing Hyun-soo's hesitation, Ji-tae orders the bonesetter to break the bones of the inmates until someone confesses. Despite witnessing one of the inmates trading cigarettes earlier that day, Hyun-soo remains silent, fearing the consequences for the man involved. However, as he watches the other inmates endure unjust torture, he finally discloses the true culprit's name. After exposing the guilty man, Hyun-soo is dismissed. As he leaves, he hears the screams of the man now being tortured by the bonesetter for selling cigarettes behind Ji-tae's back. Later that night, Hyun-soo awakens from his sleep to discover the wimp hanging from the ceiling. It appears that the constant torture had become unbearable for him, leading him to choose death over his agonizing, meaningless life. Witnessing the wimp's lifeless body being removed, Hyun-soo fears he might be the next target. Panicked, he attempts to flee the prison but is swiftly apprehended by the guards, who subject him to a severe beating. As punishment for his escape attempt, Hyun-soo was confined to solitary confinement. On the other hand, Prosecutor Tae-hee discusses with Chief Park the option of administering a polygraph test to Hyun-soo. She explains that if Hyun-soo refuses the test, it could be used against him in court to suggest guilt. Even if the polygraph indicates he's telling the truth, it wouldn't be admissible as evidence. She then asks Chief Park if he is confident that Hyun-soo is the killer. Chief Park replies that he trusts only the evidence, which points to Hyun-soo as the perpetrator. The next day, Hyun-soo is brought to the police station, where he is given the opportunity to undergo a polygraph test. Prosecutor Tae-hee attempts to intimidate him, warning that without a strong defense, he could face a death or life sentence. She suggests that taking the polygraph could bolster his claims of innocence. Chief Park intervenes, urging Hyun-soo to consider taking the polygraph test despite its inadmissibility in court. He suggests that it could sway public opinion in Hyun-soo's favor, potentially leading to a more manageable life in prison and bringing happiness to his parents. Prosecutor Tae-hee allows Hyun-soo time to consult with his attorney, but under the influence of their persuasion, he agrees to the test without seeking legal advice. After securing Hyun-soo's consent, Chief Park contacts Jung-han to inform him of the situation. Upon discovering that Hyun-soo's new lawyer is Mi Kyeon, Chief Park promptly reaches out to her and informs her about Hyun-soo's decision to undergo the polygraph test. Aware of the potential risks for Hyun-soo, Mi Kyeon dispatches Soo Jin to the National Forensic Service to support their client. Meanwhile, Jung-han contacts his ex-wife, who works at NFS, and requests a favor regarding the upcoming polygraph test. He arrives at NFS to ensure everything goes smoothly for Hyun-soo. On their way to NFS, Chief Park asks Hyun-soo if he wants to bid farewell to Guk-hwa before her cremation. Hyun-soo agrees, but upon seeing her lifeless body with an autopsy incision, he becomes distressed. His asthma is triggered, and he reaches for his nebulizer, but Chief Park intervenes, reminding him that taking any medication before a polygraph test is not allowed. Soon, Hyun-soo is taken to the polygraph examination room, where Soo Jin also joins him. Before the test, Jung-han advises him against it, but Hyun-soo is too desperate to prove his innocence. Soo Jin then explains the procedure to Hyun-soo. He will be asked 11 questions, 6 of which will be related to the case. She emphasizes the importance of staying calm, as the test's results depend on his mental state. The test begins and goes smoothly until the examiner asks if Hyun-soo stabbed Guk-hwa. Since Hyun-soo did stab Guk-hwa in the hand when they were drinking, he cannot truthfully say no. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Soo Jin leaves the room to inform her supervisor about the predicament. Upon learning about the problematic question, Jung-han enters the examination room and begins citing the rule violations committed by Chief Park. Soo Jin supports his statements, highlighting that Chief Park breached the Attorney-at-Law Act by having Hyun-soo meet a prosecutor without contacting his attorney. They also point out that individuals with respiratory issues are deemed unfit to take a polygraph test. Given that the accused attorney has the right to stop and refuse the test, Soo Jin successfully halts the proceedings, preventing Hyun-soo from further complicating his situation. Although the test is immediately stopped, Hyun-soo remains dissatisfied, feeling he has failed to prove his innocence. Back in the prison, Hyun-soo is confronted by Do-sik. Do-sik reveals that Hyun-soo informed on him after the wimp's death, leading the authorities to beat him up and place him in solitary confinement. Now, Do-sik seeks revenge. Before he can harm Hyun-soo, Sang-soo intervenes, causing Do-sik to back off. Later, Ji-tae summons Hyun-soo and gives him a book on the Criminal Procedure Act, suggesting that Hyun-soo must decide whether he wants his protection. The following day, as Hyun-soo prepares to leave the prison for his review hearing, a guard, acting on Do-sik's orders, gives him a pair of glasses. The intention is to make him appear innocent and vulnerable. On the other hand, Guk-hwa is cremated, and Jung-han attends the ceremony, observing her friends. One of them is Hyo-jong, the girl whose name was on a painting in Guk-hwa's house. Judging by her demeanor, she seems genuinely saddened by her friend's death and unlikely to be involved in the murder. While browsing Guk-hwa's social media profile, Jung-han finds a picture of her outside a rehabilitation center. Sensing something suspicious, he visits the center and learns from Dr. Chan Yeol that Guk-hwa had been struggling with drug addiction and undergoing treatment for 3 years. When Jung-han requests her medical files, Dr. Chan Yeol initially refuses. Jung-han then threatens to report the doctor for prescribing narcotics to Guk-hwa. With no other choice, Dr. Chan Yeol hands over a large number of Guk-hwa's medical files from the past 3 years. On the other hand, the review hearing begins with Prosecutor Tae-hee urging the judge to keep Hyun-soo confined due to the severity of his alleged crime. Mi Kyon counters, arguing that a normal college student with no prior offenses is being forced to live with heinous criminals in a correctional facility even though he has not been found guilty yet. She instructs Hyun-soo to show the judges the bruises and scars from torture on his body. After Hyun-soo displays his scars, Tae-hee interjects, explaining that Hyun-soo attempted to escape from the facility, which is why he was beaten by the guards and now bears the scars. Tae-hee's relentless questioning and Hyun-soo's less convincing answers put him in a difficult position, strengthening the accusations against him. Additionally, Tae-hee brings up Hyun-soo's refusal to take the polygraph test, further raising the judge's suspicions about his involvement in the crime. After hearing both parties, the judge announces that Hyun-soo's confinement will benefit social stability. Since Mi Kyon was unaware of Hyun-soo's escape attempt, she strictly advises him not to keep her in the dark again. She tells him that if she had known, she might have come up with a suitable response before the hearing. After she leaves, Jung-han talks to Soo-jin and hands her Guk-hwa's medical files, believing these documents might help in defending Hyun-soo. On his way back to the prison, Hyun-soo breaks down in tears, thinking about the awful life he has to endure with the other inmates. As he heads to his cell, Do-sik passes by and slashes his arm with a razor. Hyun-soo immediately goes to the infirmary, but it is closed. Ji-tae stitches his wound and advises him to be strong, saying that the only thing he needs to focus on now is how to survive in prison. On the other hand, when Mi Kyon receives Guk-hwa's medical files, she uses them to visit Prosecutor Tae-hee and negotiate a deal. Tae-hee understands that if Guk-hwa's drug addiction is exposed and it's proven she supplied drugs to Hyun-soo, their case could face complications. Additionally, she hasn't found a clear motive for the murder yet. Considering these factors, Tae-hee proposes a deal to Mi Kyon. Hyun-soo has to face a 17-year sentence for rape and accidental murder, with no right to appeal. Mi Kyon counters, insisting on reducing the sentence to 10 years without the right to appeal. Eventually, Tae-hee agrees to the reduced sentence but emphasizes that they will need a confession from Hyun-soo to finalize the agreement. Upon finalizing the deal, Mi Kyon speaks with Hyun-soo, explaining that there's no better resolution available for this issue. Hyun-soo comprehends the gravity of the situation but is reluctant to admit to something he didn't do. Mi Kyon then presents the stark reality. He faces either a life sentence or even the death penalty. However, accepting this opportunity would mean he could leave prison in 10 years. By maintaining exemplary behavior, he could potentially be released 3 or 4 years earlier, allowing him to reintegrate into society around the age of 30. As a legal expert, she advises Hyun-soo to seize this opportunity, considering it the most favorable solution available. When Jung-han hears about the deal, he visits Hyun-soo. He acknowledges that any lawyer would see it as a great offer, but he personally believes accepting it would brand Hyun-soo as an ex-convict for life, a label that would haunt him forever. As the hearing commences, the judge announces that the defendant is prepared to confess in exchange for a plea deal. When questioned if he murdered the girl, tears well up in Hyun-soo's eyes. Unable to falsely confess to a crime he didn't commit and unwilling to carry the stigma of an ex-convict throughout his life, he tells the judges that he did not kill Guk-hwa. Hyun-soo's refusal undermines Mi Kyon's credibility, leading her to lash out at him for betraying her trust. She declares she's done with the case and storms out of the courtroom, leaving Hyun-soo with no choice but to return to his dismal life in prison. As anticipated, Do-sik approaches Hyun-soo and coerces him into purchasing 3 packs of cigarettes from Ji-tae. Fearing for his safety, Hyun-soo complies and uses his inmate card to buy the cigarettes. Ji-tae, aware that Hyun-soo doesn't smoke, understands the situation but refrains from interfering. Hyun-soo has money for only 1 pack, but despite this, Ji-tae instructs his associate to give him an extra pack. With 2 packs in hand, Hyun-soo delivers them to Do-sik, who still beats him for not bringing 3 packs. Do-sik even goes as far as to put a lit cigarette in Hyun-soo's mouth, burning his tongue. The next day, Hyun-soo calls his dad and urges him to transfer some money to his account. After buying another pack from Ji-tae, he delivers it to Do-sik, only to get beaten again. Hyun-soo tries to push Do-sik away, which infuriates the thug, who then burns Hyun-soo's hand with a lighter. Just then, Ji-tae arrives, causing the thugs to leave. Hyun-soo is taken to the infirmary, where his wound is treated. To teach Do-sik a lesson, Ji-tae orders the bone setter to beat him severely. Then, he instructs Do-sik to apologize to Hyun-soo. As a gang member, Do-sik refuses, prompting Ji-tae to punch him in the face before pouring boiling water on his hand. The prison guards, who are on Ji-tae's payroll, arrive and drag Do-sik away. On the other hand, Mi Kyung decides not to step down from the case because it would reflect poorly on her character. It will take 3 months to complete all the trials, and Mi Kyung believes this is enough time to gain some benefits. However, she won't handle the case herself. She assigns it to Soo-jin, giving her the opportunity to gain field experience. Since the case is now hers, Soo-jin decides to work with Jung-han. Jung-han visits Hyun-soo in prison and informs him that he is now his lawyer. He and Soo-jin will apply for a jury trial, which could take up to a month or 2. Before leaving, Jung-han urges Hyun-soo not to lose hope and to keep fighting. Later, while Hyun-soo is in his cell, Bone Setter arrives to take him to Ji-tae. Ji-tae needs Hyun-soo to run an errand. Hyun-soo has to go to the infirmary with a dislocated shoulder and get it treated. When Hyun-soo panics, Ji-tae calms him down and asks him to return the favor. He assures Hyun-soo that the doctor will easily pop his shoulder back in, and he'll be fine. Following this, Ji-tae instructs Bone Setter to dislocate Hyun-soo's shoulder. After the injury, Hyun-soo is taken to the infirmary, where his shoulder is popped back in and bandaged. Upon returning to the cell, Bone Setter removes his bandage and sends him back to his cell. He then boils the bandage, leaving a white residue at the bottom of the pot, which Ji-tae crushes into powder and inhales like a drug. On the other hand, Jung-han calls his ex-wife and asks for her help again. This time, he needs her skills as a crime scene investigator to thoroughly examine Gukwa's residence for more evidence. While June takes pictures of blood stains and other clues, Chief Park conducts his own investigation to uncover the truth. Meanwhile, Tae-hee informs her prosecutor colleague that she will be presenting direct evidence linking Hyun-soo to the murder. The following day, Hyun-soo arrives at the court for the jury trial. In this legal proceeding, a group of people, known as the jury, is selected to hear the evidence presented in the case and make a decision or verdict based on that evidence. First, Prosecutor Tae-hee presents her case, showing the jury images and other evidence that she claims prove Hyun-soo was the murderer. She tries to appeal to the jury's emotions by displaying photographs of Gukwa before and after the murder. In his turn, Jung-han argues that Hyun-soo, a mere college student with no prior offenses, had no motive to kill the victim. Jung-han invites Tae-hee to present her evidence so he can respond to it. Tae-hee begins by mentioning how the police sprayed blood flare on Hyun-soo and found blood all over his body. She then calls a forensic pathologist to testify. The pathologist confirms that the blood found on Hyun-soo's body belonged to the victim. Tae-hee then shows the jury a photograph of Hyun-soo's hand wound. With the pathologist's help, she creates a scenario suggesting that Hyun-soo was stabbing the victim when the knife slipped out of his hand because it got stuck in her spine, causing the wound on his hand. Since Hyun-soo claims he doesn't remember anything about the wound, Jung-han decides to clarify this for the jury. He presents Hyun-soo's drug analysis report, which shows traces of alcohol, LSD, and ketamine. Jung-han asks the pathologist what would happen to a person who consumed this combination of drugs with alcohol. The pathologist explains that these substances are narcotics, and when mixed with alcohol, they can severely affect the central nervous system, potentially leading to significant memory loss. By presenting this evidence, Jung-han demonstrates that Hyun-soo isn't lying and that there is a strong possibility he genuinely cannot remember what happened. Tae-hee then calls Officer Han Bile as a witness to describe Hyun-soo's condition when he was stopped at the checkpoint. After Tae-hee's questioning, Soo-jin steps forward to cross-examine the witness. She asks the officer if she administered a breathalyzer test on Hyun-soo at the checkpoint. When Officer Han Bile responds that the device's battery died, Soo-jin inquires whether she had obtained an urgent arrest warrant to take Hyun-soo to the police station. Officer Han Bile admits that she neither conducted the test nor had an arrest warrant. Soo-jin then questions why she took Hyun-soo to the police station without proper authorization. On top of that, she took a detour to the crime scene. According to Soo-jin, the officer committed several unlawful acts that night, further complicating Hyun-soo's case. Tae-hee then calls another officer as a witness. This officer was responsible for taking Hyun-soo to the police station. The jury is shown dashcam footage from that night, where Hyun-soo is heard asking the officers if the girl was dead. When asked about Hyun-soo's motive, the officer suggests that Hyun-soo wanted to know the victim's condition because if she were alive, it would cause him more trouble. Soo-jin questions the officer, asking if Hyun-soo might have asked out of concern for the victim. The officer denies this, stating that Hyun-soo's tone suggested otherwise. Soo-jin then shows more of the dashcam video, where the officer is seen marking his lottery ticket and making jokes. She asks the officer if he felt bad about the victim and, if so, why he wasn't serious at the moment and kept talking about his lottery ticket. Soo-jin's probing questions leave the officer speechless. The jury also seems shocked by the officer's insensitive behavior. Tae-hee then calls Hyun-soo's high school homeroom teacher and asks why Hyun-soo was advised to transfer schools. The teacher reveals that Hyun-soo had a fight with a classmate, and he pushed him down the stairs. While the classmate was unconscious, Hyun-soo continued to punch him until 2 of his teeth were knocked out. Tae-hee presents this testimony to illustrate that Hyun-soo had a violent history and that this incident wasn't his first offense. Soo-jin then takes the floor and questions Hyun-soo about the incident. Hyun-soo explains how he was repeatedly teased and disrespected by his classmates, especially regarding his father. He didn't report the bullying to school staff because he wanted to protect his father from getting involved and potentially facing more ridicule. When he reached his breaking point with the bullying, he took drastic action to stop it. However, he later regretted his actions and expressed remorse, even apologizing to his classmate. Soo-jin then addresses the jury, emphasizing that everyone, including officers on duty, makes mistakes, as was evident in Hyun-soo's case. She asserts that the prosecution failed to present solid evidence against the accused, resorting instead to questioning Hyun-soo's moral character. This approach, Soo-jin argues, was an attempt to divert attention from the lack of substantive proof. The jury and judges appear to empathize more with Hyun-soo's perspective. During the break, Jung-han asks Hyun-soo if Guk-hwa mentioned anything about her friend. Hyun-soo recalls that she had a significant falling out with her friend and had cut all ties with her afterwards. Suspicious of foul play, Jung-han approaches the friend, Hyo-jong, and questions her about the rift with Guk-hwa. He suspects that either Hyo-jong provided Guk-hwa with drugs or was involved in drug use with her. Since Guk-hwa died a week after their falling out, Jung-han suspects that Hyo-jong might be the killer, or at least she knows who the killer is. Hyo-jong vehemently denies any involvement when confronted by Jung-han. However, when threatened with police interrogation, she reluctantly provides Jo-jong's address, revealing him as the drug dealer Guk-hwa contacted on the night of her murder. Jo-jong denies all accusations when Jung-han confronts him, leaving Jung-han frustrated and empty-handed. However, after pausing outside for a moment, he returns to the shop and retrieves his phone, which he had covertly set to record earlier. His intention was to capture any conversations Jo-jong might have had with Hyo-jong regarding the address she provided. Later, Jung-han listens to the recording where Jo-jong threatens Hyo-jong, claiming he will tell the police she was also going to meet Guk-hwa the night of the murder. However, the recording reveals neither of them actually met Guk-hwa that night, suggesting they are not the killers. Jung-han then asks Soo-jin if she has collected all the CCTV footage from Hyun-soo's route that night. After receiving the USB drives containing the data, Jung-han reviews them and discovers footage showing another person chasing Guk-hwa in a truck. The individual first appears at a gas station and then follows her to the Han River. This revelation indicates that someone else was involved in Guk-hwa's murder. On the other hand, officers from the Anti-Narcotics Department arrive at the prison and request the staff to provide them with CCTV footage of all inmates who visited the hospital last month. Upon reviewing the footage, the officers identify the man in question as the notorious murderer, Hyun-soo. It is discovered that a hospital worker recently arrested for drug possession and he gave up Ji-tae's name. The officer who knows Ji-tae well doesn't want to investigate further but explains that he is under orders from his senior to proceed. Meanwhile, a female officer meets with Hyun-soo and informs him that he unwittingly became involved in a drug delivery. The bandages on his arm had been soaked with a narcotic solution. She urges Hyun-soo to reveal the identity of the person who sent him to the hospital, but Hyun-soo remains loyal to Ji-tae and refuses to say a word. On the other hand, the officer threatens Ji-tae with a possible transfer, warning that if Ji-tae is moved, he'll need to climb his way back to his current position. In response, Ji-tae chuckles and points out that many officers in the correctional facility outrank the threatening officer, and their hands aren't clean either. Just then, the officer receives a call from his superior instructing him to leave the prison and not disturb Ji-tae any further. After they depart, Ji-tae expresses gratitude to Hyun-soo for staying silent. As a token of appreciation, Ji-tae gives him a phone, allowing Hyun-soo to call his father. Hyun-soo promptly contacts home and learns from his father that their taxi, previously confiscated, has been returned following an unexpected call to the authorities' office courtesy of Ji-tae. Despite Hyun-soo's attempt to return the phone after the call, Ji-tae insists that he keep it. On the other hand, Jung-han discovers that the man following Guk-hwa that night is Cheol-ho, who previously worked as a courier. When Jung-han and Soo-jin visit Cheol-ho's former workplace, they learn he was fired a month ago due to his status as a sex offender. He was still wearing an electronic anklet. They ask the owner to check if Cheol-ho delivered a parcel to Guk-hwa's house last month. The owner confirms that he did, and Guk-hwa filed a complaint about the parcel. Meanwhile, the jury trial resumes in Tae he calls Chief Park as a witness. At the same time, Jung-han locates Cheol-ho's address and confronts him there about the CCTV footage. Cheol-ho denies knowing Guk-hwa, claiming he first saw her at the gas station. When Jung-han mentions Cheol-ho was following Guk-hwa that night and had delivered something to her house the previous month, Cheol-ho becomes defensive. When he is accused of killing Guk-hwa, Cheol-ho reacts by grabbing an axe and hurling it towards Jung-han, vehemently denying the allegations. Jung-han warns him that regardless of his actions, he will still have to face court and provide an alibi for the time of Guk-hwa's death. To defend himself, Jung-han takes out a metal stick, further enraging Cheol-ho. Before the situation escalates, police arrive and arrest Cheol-ho for attempted murder. Jung-han had anticipated this and had alerted the police beforehand. Meanwhile, in court, Chief Park continues to present reasons why he believes Hyun-soo was the killer. Unable to tolerate the accusations any longer, Hyun-soo speaks out, asserting his innocence and affirming that he has been honest with the court from the outset. Tae-hee seizes this opportunity and calls Hyun-soo as a witness to ascertain his honesty. Soo-jin tries to intervene, but Hyun-soo falls into Tae-hee's trap unwittingly. As soon as Hyun-soo takes the witness chair, Tae-hee aggressively interrogates him about his actions, criticizing him for fleeing the crime scene instead of helping Guk-hwa. She argues that if he truly were honest, he would have stayed to assist the critically injured woman. Tae-hee's relentless questioning traps Hyun-soo, leading him to admit that he doesn't know for certain whether he killed Guk-hwa or not. This admission plays into Tae-hee's strategy, undermining Hyun-soo's credibility. After the trial, Soo-jin receives a call from Jung-han, who asks about the outcome. Overcome with emotion, Soo-jin breaks down in tears and apologizes to Jung-han for her inability to prevent Hyun-soo from taking the witness chair. As a consequence of his unconvinced statement on the witness stand, Hyun-soo is once again sent back to prison. Jung-han visits Hyun-soo in prison to offer comfort, reassuring him that despite everything, nothing has fundamentally changed. Hyun-soo, deeply affected by Tae-hee's relentless questioning, starts doubting himself. He believes that he saw Guk-hwa moving her finger, and he feels guilty for not helping her. Jung-han tries to console him, explaining that Guk-hwa likely died instantly, and any movement he perceived might have been due to rigor mortis, a natural post-mortem process where muscles stiffen after death. However, Hyun-soo is too overwhelmed by depression to accept this explanation. Things take a turn for the worse when Hyun-soo watches the news and discovers that the prosecution is considering seeking the death penalty against him. Unable to contain his emotions, he breaks down in tears. To add to his misery, Do-sik mocks his situation. He has stolen Hyun-soo's phone and refuses to return it. When Hyun-soo returns to his cell and finds his phone missing, he becomes furious. He confronts Do-sik and demands the return of his phone. After Do-sik viciously beats him, Hyun-soo attempts to fight back but proves no match against the seasoned gangster. The altercation leaves Hyun-soo with multiple wounds on his face. With his inability to clear his name in court, everyone in the prison, including his cellmate Sang-soo, starts to believe he is guilty. As a result, Hyun-soo becomes an outcast nobody wants to associate with or even talk to him. Feeling desperate and isolated, he turns to Ji-tae for help. It's then that Ji-tae shares his own story. He was falsely accused in an assault case and struggled relentlessly to prove his innocence, facing disbelief at every turn. He even reached a point where he committed the unthinkable but couldn't end his suffering. Eventually, he realized that he held the key to his own freedom. He understood that survival required change, so he changed himself. He advises Hyun-soo to choose between survival and enduring his dismal life in prison. Hyun-soo opts for change, symbolizing it by lighting a cigarette. The following day, Ji-tae joins him in the mess hall, easing his loneliness. Hyun-soo now spends time with Ji-tae and faces his enemies with newfound confidence. To strengthen himself, he begins exercising and boxing with Ji-tae. Transforming from a weak college student, he becomes a formidable fighter through persistence and rigorous training. ensuring his survival. One day, he calls his sister to ask about her well-being, but she bursts out in frustration, blaming him for causing mental distress to the family. She blames Hyun-soo for everything, saying that it is because of him that they have to put up their house for sale to get out of their neighborhood, where people know them as a murderer's family. She even doubts if Hyun-soo is telling the truth about not killing the girl. Disappointed, Hyun-soo hangs up the phone and calls his mother, but she also doesn't answer his call. One day, Do-sik confronts Hyun-soo and tries to provoke a fight with him. When Hyun-soo challenges him to a duel, Do-sik laughs and accepts, underestimating Hyun-soo as the same weak boy. That night, Hyun-soo cuts his hair and meets Do-sik in the boiler room for the duel. Upon arriving, he switches off the light. When Do-sik turns it back on, Hyun-soo catches him off guard and strikes him in the head with a glass. Using his newfound fighting skills, he beats Do-sik severely until he collapses. Driven by a desire for revenge against Do-sik for his bullying, Hyun-soo prepares to throw a planter at him. However, despite his transformed personality, he still retains a part of himself that cannot harm another person. Unable to go through with it, he instead throws the planter to the ground, bringing an end to their confrontation. On the other hand, Cheol-ho, who was arrested, is being interrogated by Chief Park. However, the chief releases him upon discovering that his ankle monitor indicates he did not visit Guk-hwa's house that night. When Jung-han learns of this, he is surprised that a sex offender like Cheol-ho could be released so easily. During the subsequent jury trial, Jung-han presents evidence showing Cheol-ho had followed Guk-hwa that night. Furthermore, his ankle monitor had been inactive for an hour during that time. Cheol-ho denies the allegations, claiming his ankle monitor often runs out of battery. He questions Jung-han and the jury why they are accusing him when they have already identified the culprit whose fingerprints were all over the crime scene. Next, Jung-han calls his ex-wife, Young-ae, and inquires if she discovered anything significant at the crime scene. Young-ae discloses that the rear door to the terrace was left open due to a broken doorknob, suggesting an attempted break-in. Additionally, she suspects there was another weapon besides the knife found on Hyun-soo. From Guk-hwa's 8-piece knife set, 2 knives are missing. If one is found on Hyun-soo, then the question is, where is the other one? She also adds that the victim's hand was probably penetrated due to a knife game, and its evidence can be found on the table, which has marks of knife penetration on it. Also, traces of fluorescence brightening agent and formaldehyde were found in the wound. The combination of these chemicals is mostly found in toilet paper, which indicates that someone tried to stop the bleeding. Moreover, the wounds on Guk-hwa's back indicate that the knife blade was facing upwards. The prosecution argues that the wound on Hyun-soo's hand occurred when the knife slipped from his grasp. However, evidence suggests that if this were true, the wound would be on the inside of his hand due to the upward-facing blade. This supports Hyun-soo's testimony that he sustained the wound while cutting himself on the broken glass of the door. Additionally, despite Hyun-soo being left-handed, the analysis report suggests a strong possibility that the killer is right-handed. Rather than engage in counter-questioning, Tae-hee attempts to insinuate that Young-ae is involved in the case due to her past relationship with Jung-han. In response, Young-ae asserts that she divorced her husband because she could no longer tolerate him, emphasizing that her involvement is driven by her belief in Hyun-soo's innocence. She further argues that it is the jury's right to receive an independent analysis of the evidence from another expert. Back in the cell, Hyun-soo tattoos his arm just like Ji-tae's. He asks Ji-tae why he believes he isn't the killer, questioning if he actually is. Ji-tae responds that it doesn't matter to him whether Hyun-soo is the killer or not. What matters is what he is like in prison. Later, Do-sik confronts Hyun-soo and takes him to his gang leader, Baek-ho. Baek-ho intends to punish Hyun-soo for beating Do-sik. Surrounded by gangsters, Hyun-soo realizes he can't defeat them all and decides to surrender. Before Baek-ho can harm him, Do-sik intervenes and slaps Baek-ho hard for refusing to accept defeat in the fair duel against Hyun-soo. Warning Baek-ho to stay away from Hyun-soo, Do-sik leaves the boiler room. Despite this, he advises Hyun-soo to remain cautious, knowing Baek-ho won't simply back down. In the jury trial, Jung-han summons Guk-hwa's stepfather, Gang Pil, as a witness. It is revealed that Gang Pil filed an insurance claim immediately after Guk-hwa's death and received a payout of 700,000 won. Jung-han considers this a potential motive for murder and demands Gang Pil provide an alibi for that night. Gang Pil states he was at a hotel with his girlfriend, and CCTV footage corroborates his alibi, proving he was telling the truth. Jung-han then calls Sun-hun to the stand and questions him about his activities near Guk-hwa's house on the night of the murder. Initially, Sun-hun claims he was simply relaxing in his car, but neighborhood CCTV footage shows he had been lurking around Guk-hwa's house multiple times a week. Finally, Sun-hun admits the truth. He had a crush on Guk-hwa's friend, Hyo-jong, and had been stalking her. She even complained to the cops, and he got arrested for stalking. Hyo-jong confirms that Sun-hun is indeed telling the truth. With each suspect being cleared one by one, Jung-han is left unsure of what to do next. The following day, he calls Chief Park to the witness stand and questions why Hyun-soo's nebulizer wasn't submitted as evidence and why it was returned to him. Furthermore, Jung-han points out that there were 4 additional suspects in the case, none of whom were interviewed despite having motives to harm Guk-hwa. The stepfather may have desired her inheritance, the friend may have sought revenge for Guk-hwa sleeping with her boyfriend, Ji-jong, who supplied drugs to the victim. Moreover, Cheol-ho was observed following her that night and had knowledge of her. Despite these potential leads, Chief Park did not interview any of these suspects. Chief Park defends his actions by stating that he acts based on the evidence, which pointed towards Hyun-soo as the murderer. Regarding the nebulizer, Chief Park explains that he returned it to Hyun-soo because he needed it at the time. Jung-han accuses Chief Park of intentionally withholding evidence from the scene. He argues that Chief Park removed the nebulizer to prevent Hyun-soo from appearing as an innocent young man with asthma in front of the judges, thereby maintaining the image of him as a violent murderer. Jung-han further criticizes Chief Park for focusing solely on Hyun-soo as a suspect and neglecting to interview other potential suspects, suggesting bias and targeting in the investigation. To conclude the hearing, Tae-hee addresses the jury and acknowledges the flaws in the justice system. However, she emphasizes that Hyun-soo remains a suspect with incriminating evidence. His fingerprints were found at the crime scene, he attempted to destroy evidence, and he was covered in the victim's blood. Back in prison, Ji-tae gifts Hyun-soo a smartphone, expressing hope for his soon release. Meanwhile, Jung-han prepares for his final speech for the upcoming jury trial. The extreme stress exacerbates his skin condition, leaving him visibly flushed and red-faced. The following day, Jung-han delivers his final speech, and afterward, the jury's verdict is collected. 4 jury members find Hyun-soo guilty, while 5 believe he is innocent. Despite the poll, this isn't the final decision. The judge ultimately decides, considering the jury's votes. Finally, the judge announces that Hyun-soo is indeed guilty of murdering Guk-hwa and sentences him to life imprisonment. Jung-han's eyes fill with tears, and Hyun-soo's parents cry out loudly upon hearing that their son will spend the rest of his life in prison. Hyun-soo returns to prison and instructs his parents not to visit him anymore. As he suffers behind bars, Prosecutor Tae-hee receives a promotion, while Chief Park is honored with a medal for his dedicated service before retiring as a respected detective. Ji-tae laments that Korea's judicial system only favors the wealthy, believing that justice is out of reach for those without money, power, or connections. The next day, while Ji-tae and Hyun-soo are in the yard, Do-sik sneaks up behind Ji-tae and slashes his throat. Ji-tae succumbs to severe blood loss on the spot. The guards swiftly apprehend the crazed Do-sik and give him a beating. Ji-tae was the sole positive influence in Hyun-soo's life. He was a friend who believed in him and taught him how to survive. With Ji-tae gone, Hyun-soo's existence feels devoid of meaning once more. On the other hand, Jung-han refuses to give up on the case. He remembers noticing a camera in Sun-hun's car during his investigation. Knowing that Sun-hun had been stalking Guk-hwa's friend for quite some time, Jung-han suspects that the camera might have captured something crucial. He confronts Sun-hun and asks for the photographs, but Sun-hun informs him that the police seized all the photos during his arrest. Jung-han enlists the help of an officer to obtain the photographs from Sun-hun's camera. While reviewing them, he makes an unexpected discovery: footage of Guk-hwa's rehabilitation center doctor, Chan Yeol, leaving her house. Upon checking the victim's call records, Jung-han notices Chan Yeol's number appearing multiple times. Armed with this evidence, he approaches retired Chief Park and reveals that Dr. Chan Yeol had an affair with Guk-hwa. However, when she learned of his marriage, she ended the relationship, which Chan Yeol did not take well. Chief Park initially states that he cannot do anything now, but Jung-han makes him realize how we all want to keep our loved ones happy and safe while giving pain to others. Influenced by his words, Chief Park discusses the matter with Tae-hee, and after some deliberation, they take action. Several days later, Jung-han visits Hyun-soo in prison and delivers the news. The real killer has been apprehended and has confessed to Gukwa's murder. Despite Jun Han's relentless efforts, Prosecutor Tae-hee claims in her press conference that it was the prosecution who tirelessly pursued the real culprit after Hyun-soo consistently maintained his innocence. They initially destroyed an innocent person's life, and when the truth finally emerged, they took credit for resolving the case. Hyun-soo is finally proven innocent and is released from prison, but he is no longer the boy he used to be. The relentless torment in prison shattered his spirit, morphing an innocent boy into a hardened fighter forever haunted by the scars of a battle he never chose. Stripped of his innocence, his life became a testament to the cruelty he endured, reshaping his soul into one forged by pain and survival.